Thank you for having me. It's great that all of you showed up. I know that they always have this one reserve table here for friends and family, just so that when nobody else shows up, you're not talking to an empty room. So I'm glad that there's a few of you that showed up today. When they first asked me about speaking, I thought, who would want to listen to me? I don't have a college degree. I don't have any credentials behind my name. I'm used to speaking to a captive audience. And by captive, I mean I sign their paycheck. Not really. It's direct deposit anymore today. But I hope that at the end of this meeting, all of you will walk away with the same feeling. Wow, I'm really glad I came today. That was really beneficial. So I'm going to be speaking to you today a little bit about leadership and a lot of how I would talk to my people. About 10 years ago, I set out to form intentionally a great leadership team. Now, almost everything that I have learned has been through reading books and some experience and some mentors, but most everything I've learned has been from reading books. And I wanted to pass that knowledge down. If any of you have read a lot of books, you'll know that you'll often get one or two good nuggets out of a book. And I just wish that somebody would take all of the hundreds of books I've read and boil them down to the 2 or 3 good nuggets in every one. That would have saved me hours in my life. And that was part of my goal with forming a leadership team, is to take everything I had learned through experience and reading and get them up to the point where I could work less and start to actually take a vacation and maybe not work 80 hours a week. So Bekins is celebrating our 50-year anniversary this year, and I was there on day one. I was hoping to see a few more shocked looks in the crowd, like, wow, you're that old, but clearly I didn't get any. It only took me 50 years, if you do the math, then, for somebody to ask me to actually speak to them. So you're the first. 50 years it took, okay? I'm going to speak to you, as I said, like I would our leadership team. So how many of you in here, by raise of hands, and I promise this might be the last time I ask you to do this, how many of you in here are or hope to be a leader in a small business that has employees? Okay, most of you. Great. The rest of you, if you want to leave, that's okay. Business is really all about relationships. And I have learned that more and more as these years have gone by. And many times in my life, I can look back and say, wow, I was an idiot 5 years ago. I didn't know how important these things were or how much I should have paid attention to these things. And then 5 years go by, and I look back and go, wow, I was an idiot 5 years ago. And that doesn't stop. As you keep growing in experience and learning things, you reflect and go, I wish I had known those things back then that I know now, and I probably would have been different. When I say business is all about relationships, I really group them in 3 different areas. Customers, somebody pays for us to do something. Our vendors, which can be advisors, attorneys, CPAs, or places that we buy goods from. You could say that we're their customers. And then that third group is the employees. And that, for me, was always the most important of the 3 groups. And it's the employees truly that make the company. And without employees, a company is just a shell. And it's them that will be the difference between how large you can grow your company and how well you can grow your company. Because you cannot do it yourself. It's impossible. And even though when you're small, you have to be really scrappy. And you've probably heard the saying that you wear a lot of hats. And that's very true. You do wear a lot of hats. I've been asked before, what's the most important role as a small business owner? And the most important role is that you have to play a lot of roles. That's the most important role. There is no one role that you can just say, I'm really good at this. And so I don't have to do the rest. I'll just do this really well, and I'll grow a good, successful business. It does not work that way. you have to wear a lot of hats. The smaller you are, the more hats you have to wear. The bigger you get, you can start to push some of those hats off, but you have to start thinking different and thinking bigger as you get bigger. There was a great book written by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth, and I give this out to anybody that comes to me that is considering opening their own business. And the E-Myth, I'm going to synopsize this for you quickly. It's about Janie, who does a great job at baking pies, and everybody loves Janie's pies. And so they encourage Janie to start a pie company. And so Janie does. Before long, Janie is burdened with the fact that she's got to invest in buying all the supplies, finding a store, opening it, manning it when people come in to buy her pies, baking her pies all night long. She gets big enough and successful enough because her pies are great that she has to hire somebody. Now suddenly Janie has to pay attention to human resources and insurance and workman's comp and taxes and everything that comes along with hiring people. And guess what? The person that Janie hired doesn't quite have the same passion for pies that Janie did. And so when Janie hires other people to help her with making pies, they don't come out as well. They're not as great as the pies that Janie made, and her business starts to suffer. And Janie quickly realizes that the only hat she really enjoyed was baking pies. And so she closes and goes back to just baking pies. The E-Myth is about the entrepreneurial myth that if you like to do this, you can be great at running a business. And that is not true. Because just because you like to do one thing doesn't mean that's going to make you successful. You have to be really good at wearing many hats. And I like to think about these hats as different roles that you might see out there. First one that you've probably heard before, what's it like running your own business or being a leader in a business? I'm a firefighter, right? All day long, I'm putting out fires. I'm solving problems. That's probably the one analogy I hear a lot from people who are in the business world. And when you're a firefighter, you're not just putting out fires. When you're a leader, you have to be thinking about, am I solving this problem completely? That is something that I try to teach all the time, is when you're dealing with a problem, are you solving it completely? That fire will not come back. You will not be dealing with it again. Often when you're solving problems, bless you, you are negotiating or you're making a compromise. And a lot of times, that's a really good time for you to get something in return. There's another great book that talks about you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And a lot of times, some of the best times to get something from a negotiation is when you have to solve a problem and you have to fix something permanently and you have to make a compromise with someone. It's also very important that when you are dealing with issues and putting out fires, that you are slow to jump to conclusions. One thing that I have learned happens time and time again as that the problem that you are first presented is rarely the actual problem. The problem as someone comes to you and says, hey, I need your help fixing this, and they tell you what the problem is. Rarely is that actually the problem. It's often colored by someone's perspective or by what they want you to do for them. They're going to package it in such a way that they want you to respond or give them a certain answer. It's very, very important that you take the time to make sure that when you are having that firefighter role, that hat on, that when problems are presented to you, you ask a lot of questions and you make sure that you're getting to the core problem. People generalize way too much. And that is what I call unactionable information. When people generalize about a problem or a situation, you may sit there and go, well, what am I supposed to do with that? How do I do something with that? It's because you don't know what the core issue is, because it's being generalized too much. So make sure that you don't allow yourself to go down a path when somebody is presenting a problem a wrong way or generalizing it too much to you. This is another role that I play. I call it the arsonist. I'm running around and I'm a firefighter and I'm an arsonist. I'm putting out fires and I'm lighting fires. What do you mean lighting fires? Have you ever noticed that sometimes people need to be motivated? You got to light a fire under them to get them going sometimes. Now, I've read books out there that question whether you can actually motivate someone or not. Okay, you can argue about that all day long. Can you actually motivate somebody, or do they have to be intrinsically motivated internally? We won't argue that. But here's your role as an arsonist. If you're not the one that is laying out timely goals and high expectations, you're never going to know whether that person is motivated to meet them or not. Whether you're motivating them or whether those goals and expectations motivate them, doesn't really matter where it came from. The core is, can this person meet the goals and the expectations that you have set out? So your job as an arsonist is to make sure to set the standards for performance, including timing, create the structure, and make sure that you provide a sense of urgency. And then you will find out if that person is who you want on your team, who you want working with you. Because when you can clearly prioritize and create the structure that tells them what's expected of them and when, the motivation is up to them. Are they going to carry it through to the finish line? And if they don't, then you have another conversation about whether that's the right person for your team. The arsonist role is also part of your responsibility to talk about a thematic goal. We change our thematic goal annually. And all of our goals kind of watershed down from that thematic goal of our company. That thematic goal gets everybody rowing in the same direction on what we're trying to achieve as a company. Another role is inspector. Okay? Inspect what you expect. Our company is one of very high accountability. And let me tell you a little trick about accountability. You can tell someone what you expect. Best, you always put it in writing. But then if you do not pay attention to whether it happens or not, and you don't have a good feedback loop, and you stop giving it your attention, guess what happens? If it doesn't matter to you, it won't matter to them. And things start to fall by the wayside. And time goes by and you go back and you reflect and you go, how come this isn't happening? Didn't we talk about that? Didn't I have somebody that was supposed to be responsible for making sure this happened? How did that fall by the wayside? And you come to find out it's because somebody thought it didn't seem to matter anymore, because it didn't seem to matter to you, so I kind of thought, it didn't matter that much. Now here's a trick with feedback and making sure that you never lose sight of what matters. Put in an automatic feedback loop or a reporting system. So you might be thinking to yourself right now, how do I stay on top of everything that I ask somebody to do? You don't. You ask them to. So if I ask somebody to do a certain task on a regular basis, I'm going to build in a way for them to report back to me that they're doing that. So then my job becomes just making sure that I get that report every month and I can breeze through it. That way they know that it's still important to me. And I can know very quickly if that ball gets dropped. Very important part. Engineer. Some of you in here are builders. Have you ever had a design given to you that you look at and go, how am I supposed to build that? In business, when you build a structure for a business, you have to be a good engineer. Because business is, in my mind, about two major things: people and process. And if the process that we build, the procedures and the policies, doesn't work, it's like giving a builder a blueprint that they can't build. People are going to struggle. They're not going to be able to make it work. So an engineer is a very important part of that role as a leader, because you have to make sure that not only are you providing vision and strategy, but the structure that you put in place has to be engineered that it is simple and it works, and that it doesn't create roadblocks or additional hurdles for your people to do their best job. Can you be a dreamer? Absolutely. You can be a dreamer, but make sure that your dreams can be engineered to be built. And that if you can't do that, you have somebody on your staff that works closely with you that can. A psychologist. I've said business is all about people and process. Because so much of it is about people, you better be pretty good at listening and understanding the psychology behind people. Because we're all very complex. We're all flawed. We all have difficulties in life. We all go through difficult times when we need support, we need reassurance. And if you're not there as a role to be a good listener, to be empathetic with your people, and to help them through difficult times, give them the resources they need, because you probably have access and knowledge of more things than they do. You know somebody. You know something. There's a big role in leadership when you have employees, when it comes down to the psychological part of how you handle them. A coach. All right, we all need a good coach. Coach because people need to be trained. They need to learn from repetitiveness, from practice. And as you get bigger, what you say has bigger consequences. People will do things based on what you say as their coach, as their leader. So make sure that you're telling them the right things, the prioritized things, the important things, because otherwise you'll send people galloping off into the distance thinking that they've got a charge from you, and they come back and you go, why'd you do that? Well, you mentioned in this meeting that you wanted this. Well, that wasn't what I meant. It's really important that you understand as you grow as a company, your words have more meaning. And you have to be really careful how you pick them. Slow down and make sure that you are saying the right words. There are three-letter acronyms that I use often in training my leadership team. This is the first one. HEH. Stands for hinder, enable, help. Everything you do with your people, you're going to be doing one of those three things. You're either going to be hindering them by not giving them clear direction, not helping them when they need it, or you're going to be enabling them. I always have the picture in my mind of this person with the globe on their head that candy spits out the mouth, and everybody goes up to them and says, I need this, and they push the button and out spills candy. And it's like you're the candy vending machine. You're enabling someone to not be resourceful and figure out how to do things well on their own. You don't want to be an enabler either. You don't want to enable people to not become the best version of themselves. What you want to do is the last, help. You want to help them to be the best version of themselves without hindering them or without enabling them. And there is a really fine line between those three. So when somebody comes to you or you're helping someone, I always go through my head, which one am I doing here? Am I helping them? Am I enabling them? Or am I hindering them? Patrick Lencioni writes a lot of great books. And by the way, at the end of this, we have provided a resource list of some of my top books. And we'll have that emailed out to you so you can have that to look at yourself. And books are like movies. You know, you might hate the ones I like and vice versa, but I can tell you that every book, even the worst ones I've read, I got something out of. So always good to read. But in Patrick Lencioni's book, The Advantage, he talks about the most important role of a leader is to be a chief reminding officer, CRO. He said people need to hear things 7 times before they really sink in. And your biggest role as a leader in a company is to be a chief reminding officer. And there's another thing that I've learned without any shadow of a doubt in 50 years. Communication is the biggest problem in business. And my employees will probably tell you I've said that more than 100 times since they've heard me talk. Because if I could solve that one issue where people communicated well without misunderstanding each other and without changing their minds and saying, oh, that wasn't what I meant, or, I feel different today. When I get presented with issues, it's amazing to me how many times when I boil down to it, it's a communication issue. Somebody didn't communicate well. And so being a chief reminding officer is a really important role for you to make sure that you continue to communicate. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Where are we going? Because people cannot hear it enough. How many times do you tell your loved one that you love them? Do they ever hear it enough? There's the old joke where the wife said to her husband, honey, you never tell me you love me anymore. And he said, I told you once. If it changes, I'll let you know. That doesn't go over well in a relationship, right? You need to hear it often. And that's why we say it often. And the same thing goes with your people in your company. They need to hear what you're saying often. So remember that role of being a chief reminding officer. There was another book I read, Simon Sinek wrote it. It's called Start With Why. And it was one of those books that it was okay, but it's not on my top 10 resource list. I felt like I read the title and I pretty much knew the story of the book. And the concept here is that when you talk with people, start with why, whatever it is you're telling them and whatever it is you're doing as a company. How many times do you listen to somebody talk or somebody tell you something and you go, yeah, but why? Why? Here's a very simple example. The other day I was signing checks and there was a check in there to a customer for several $1,000s and it just said, customer returned hood. And now for me, I'm very intent on growing our business. And every time we lose a sale or don't make a sale, I want to know why. Why? Because I want our business to be one that there is no reason you shouldn't buy from us. And so I said, yeah, but why? Why did they return the hood? And then it was, oh, it didn't fit. Why didn't we sell them one that did fit? It continues to down this why pattern. And when I am that inspector mode, I am constantly thinking, did I get to the last why? Because then I know that I can do something about it when I got to the last why. So never forget the importance of why, not just in what you tell people, but in when you're trying to discover core issues and problems. If you don't know the why, how are you ever going to improve your business, which is always a person or a process? There's a saying in retail is detail. Years ago, somebody got me a little book that says, don't sweat the small stuff. And then I saw this other little thing that said, sweat the small stuff. And I think, which one's right? Who's right here? I got one place, they say, don't sweat the small stuff. Just focus on the big stuff. And others that say, no, sweat the small stuff. And I finally came in my mind to this picture. This is the cockpit of an airplane. And if you look, the details here are incredible. If any of you have ever been in a cockpit or ever flown, talk about details. The buttons, the knobs, the readouts, you name it, there are details littered all over that thing. And guess what? Every one of them could be the difference between life and death. So do those pilots have to pay attention to the details? Absolutely they do. But what's right above all those details? Big thing called a plate glass window. Why is that there? If you've ever watched a pilot fly a plane, you're looking around at the details, they're looking up. You're looking around at the details, and they're looking up. It's because they're sweating the details without losing sight of the big picture. And that's the key, is you do have to sweat the details, but never at the cost of losing sight of the big picture. Where you're going, what your company stands for, you never lose sight of the big picture. This is a word that was the bane of my early existence. I knew early on that I wanted to have a company with a fabulous culture. And I read countless books on culture. And most of them were way too fluffy for me. I'm not a fluffy person. I want hard facts, details, actionable items. And I really struggled with how to create a path forward of actionable steps to create the culture that I wanted. And it wasn't until I read the book The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni that I recognized the real steps that I had to take to build a culture. And it took years. And what I recognized is that the word culture can be overused and vague and ambiguous. And it can mean a lot of different things. What I believe it means most in most companies, what I believe defines the culture in most companies, is the least or the worst that you allow to happen under your watch. That is what defines your culture. Whether you want to admit it or not, and whether your people will be honest with you or not, the worst thing that you allow to happen in your company. So if it's somebody bullying someone, if it's somebody doing something illegal, if it's somebody doing something not right for the customer, whatever you allow as the leader becomes the definition of your culture. There's another great author that wrote a book and used the analogy of if you want to have a great company, you have to get the right people on your bus and the wrong people off your bus and the right people in the right seat of the bus. Now, the bus is the analogy for the company. And I love that. And I really gathered around that. I really rallied around that thought process. In fact, many years ago, my employees at one of our company meetings bought a remote-controlled bus and put beacon stickers on it and ran it up the aisle of our meeting room because I use the analogy of us and our bus so often. The problem with that is that you first have to define your bus. Who are you? What is your bus? If you know that, oh, I love that, I need to get the right people on my bus and the wrong people off. Well, first you got to figure out what your bus is. What do you stand for? Who are the right people to get on your bus? And it's really more of a discovery process than it is anything else. Because most companies' bus definition is a trickle down of the leadership of that company. It's just not in writing yet. But often the fingerprints of that company come from the owner or the leaders in that company. And really what you needed to do to define your bus is to put it in writing. Now in our company, and this is part of the process of that book I told you about, The Advantage, it's also very similar if you've ever heard about these entrepreneurial operating systems, EOS. Some of you may have gone through some of those where you can pay a consultant to step you through this process. If you don't have enough money to do that, you can buy the book for under $20 and do it yourself, if you truly put your mind to it and do it. So this is what I call our single most important page. I know you can't read it. You don't have to. The next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the things that are on this. But this is really, more than anything else, an accountability document. And I will tell you this. If you don't want to be held accountable by your people, do not do this. Because the minute that you put in writing exactly what you stand for, and then you do something different, you're going to know about it. And they're going to quickly realize that you are inauthentic and you are not a leader of integrity. So if you don't want to be held accountable, don't do this process. But if you want to change your culture, the biggest thing that set our culture was when we put in writing what we stand for. We defined our bus, and then we lived by it. And the decisions we make at any level in this company must conform with that document. Now, one of the things we had to do was define, why do we exist? And hopefully you've all read that by now, so I'm not going to read it to you. The other thing that we had to do was say, how will we succeed in a competitive industry when others will not? Now, that's a broad question that all of you should be able to answer also, because there is not an industry left out there that is so lucrative that you can just go hog. You don't have to pay attention to anything. You're just going to be successful. They're all competitive. So what's going to make you different? How are you going to succeed? Now, in the book, they talk about this being 3 things. Why 3? Because if you have to anchor something out in the ocean, the most stable anchoring is by using 3 anchor points. If you have to sit on a chair, you can't do it with less than 3. It's called a bar stool, right? So 3 is the magic number. If you as a company cannot define the 3 ways that you are going to be successful when others will not be in your industry, you don't know where you're heading. The other thing is our values, our core values. Again, often these are a discovery process more than they are making something up. It's not, oh, who do we want to be? Let's make this up. Let's say we're this. No, let's look at us really. Let's look at who we are, who we have been. And if you're starting business for the first time and you've never done this before, look at yourself. Who are you? What do you value? And put that down in writing, because that is going to become the values of your company. Ours form the acronym ACT-BEAK, the 6 core values that we have. And I love acronyms because it helps me to remember things. And so a lot of the things that I'll talk to you about today are acronyms. Our number 1 value there is accountability. Now, they're not in a prioritized order. This is a book, The World's Most Powerful Leadership Principle. It's on my resource list again. My favorite quote in the entire book. Far and away, the biggest gap we find in leadership skills is failing to confront people with problems and situations as they arise and to hold people accountable. The second place gap is not even close. I love that saying because I lived it, I saw it, and somebody put it in writing, and it's like a light bulb went off, and I went, you are exactly right. Exactly right. So if accountability is not important to you, you're going to have a really difficult time in business. Why don't most people like accountability? Well, if you're on the receiving end of accountability, you don't like somebody calling you out, right? Saying, hey, you're doing this wrong. Let me teach you the right way to do it. If you're on the giving end of accountability, you probably don't like conflict, right? How many of you go, oh, I want to run into conflict, please. Let me be the one to go and have conflict with someone. You don't want that, so you avoid it. What happens? People keep doing the same thing the wrong way, and you never get better and you never improve. Conflict is necessary, but it's good for conflict. You don't have to be mean to have conflict. It can be very kind. Conflict is healthy when it's done right. Avoiding it is like avoiding healthy food and running to the fast food store. It might get you by for a little while, but eventually you're going to get not very good looking. So another 3 letters, ETA. I teach all my leaders this. When you are working with your team, this is your recipe right here. You want to bake a great loaf of bread of your employees? Here's your recipe. Simple as this. Expectations, training, and accountability. Number 1, and this is the hardest one. The first one is the hardest. You have to put your expectations in writing for your people. I say often that I would be somebody's best employee if they put in writing exactly what they expected of me. Because then I would know I could achieve it. But if you just tell me verbally and then you change your mind or you feel different the next day, I'm going to get frustrated and leave. So your number one job, set your expectations clearly in writing. Your number two job is to train them, to make sure they can do it. They can meet those expectations. And the best way is to have them show you back that they got it, they can do it, and then great, we're all good. Now the last one is accountability when they stop meeting those expectations. Now maybe there's a good reason for it, so sit down and have a conversation first and ask them about why they're not meeting those expectations. I've said before, communication is the biggest problem in business. If it isn't written, it isn't real. Another saying that I use all the time. The spoken word evaporates. The written word lasts forever. If you want to build a company, you better build it on written words. If you build it on spoken words, it will evaporate and you will feel like you're dealing with the same thing over and over again. It's your job to give written clarity on your expectations, to create clarity in writing and not misunderstanding or confusion for your people. I use this saying all the time. At the moment you become aware. I put it in job descriptions, I put it in policies and procedures. I put it in writing. Why? Because I don't like the was gonna brothers. I don't know how many times you've ever met a was gonna brother, but they're the person that come up to you and they say, oh yeah, I was gonna do that. And I say, oh, you're a was gonna brother. Okay, when were you gonna do that? Delayed obedience is disobedience. I use that on my sons all the time. Didn't work that well when they were growing up, but I thought it was great. Here's the thing. If your expectations for when you expect somebody to do something aren't clearly in writing, they're going to make that determination themselves. And they're going to be a was gonna brother. Here's the other 3 letters. CPR. When you talk about accountability, these are the 3 things. Number 1, first time you deal with something with someone, you focus on the content. What happened? The second time you're dealing with the same thing, you focus on the pattern. Hey, this now happened twice. The third time, you're dealing with a relationship. I'm not sure if I can trust you now. You know how that makes me feel that now this is the third time we had to have this conversation? When you talk about a situation with somebody and you're talking about accountability, people so often dismiss small problems. They let them just keep happening. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You don't worry about it, it becomes a big problem. You got to address the small things early on, and you change how you approach based on how many times you've had this situation. This is an old drawing that I made probably 20 years ago. I'm just going to cut to the chase. I know I'm running long here. Okay, you're going to have new problems all the time in business. This is supposed to be like a slide with snowballs coming down at you, and you're like dodging snowballs all day long, just like the problems you've got. And there are new ones created through circumstance of business all day long coming at you. And you've got to deal with them as they come down this slide. But if you don't fix them at the core, they're going to recycle and come back again. Every problem that comes at you, if you ask down to the very core level of what caused it, you will find it, in my experience, to be either a person issue or a process issue. Every time. Either somebody didn't do their job, and it was written clearly, the expectations for them, or you failed and didn't put the expectations clearly for them, either in your procedures, their job descriptions, whatever it may be. If you didn't write it for them, shame on you, because then they could make up their own decision. But if it was clearly in writing, now you need to have an accountability discussion with that person. It's another quick one. I see this all the time in business. This is a real actual example of something that happened, and I call it concurrent problem solving. And I've heard this many times. They've got 3 different paths to go down, and they go down one first, and they wait until they decide if that fixes the problem or not, and then they go down the second path, and then they wait to see if that one fixes the problem, and then they go down the third path. Like, no, no, no. Go down all three at the same time. Because you're going to get to an end result quicker when you do all three. So when you sit there and you go, I've got a problem, there's three possible solutions. Train your people. Don't do one and wait until you see how that works out before you do the other one. Do all three at the same time. If it means calling three different people, if it means whatever, I'm telling you, when it comes to efficiency in business, this is a very important thing. I have learned that people are absolutely the most important part of your business, and the right person makes all the difference in the world. And the higher level the role is, the more that applies. I have struggled through people that were not the right fit, and hoped and hoped and hoped, and then it didn't work out, and I got the right person. It was like, hallelujah. What a difference between when you have the right person. So if you're struggling with the wrong person in a role, in a high role, don't ever kid yourself. The right person makes all the difference. How many of you have done paint by numbers before? Okay? This is what it looks like the first day that your employee joins your company. They have no clue. Imagine going to work for a new company the first time you know nothing about them. You don't know anything about their people, their process, what they do, how they do it, nothing. It's like you're staring at a paint by numbers wall. I use this analogy with my new people, and I say every day you're going to come in and you're going to learn a few things, and you're going to fill in a few of those spots, but the big picture still isn't going to make sense to you. Because just like paint by numbers, it isn't until you get a majority of them filled in that you start to see what the big picture is going to be like. So my point with you here is have a good onboarding process for your new people, because this is what they're walking into day one. And if you just throw them to the wolves, the chances of them being successful with your company is really not good. And guess what? If you want them to be a strong advocate for your company, show them your best foot first. That is with having a great onboarding process. And you do not have to spend a lot of time, money, or energy on this. Get good reading material. And you know what? If you have meetings for your people, you have company meetings, or you do presentations for them, everybody's got one of these on their side right now. Have somebody videotape it and stick it on a server, and then just make a list for your new people of all the things that you want them to watch and you want them to read, and what steps you want them to take to go through your company. Have a good onboarding process. It's so important. They've got to know what the most important things are in your company. Early on, I was labeled a perfectionist, and I hated that. And I thought, I am not a perfectionist. Why do people think that? It's because I have high expectations. And I read this quote by Vince Lombardi, and I thought, I love that quote, because this is how I feel. We are not perfectionists. I'm not a perfectionist. I make as many or more mistakes as anyone in my company. And usually they're more expensive than any of the rest of them when I make them. So often when you have high expectations, people will start to think that making a mistake is bad. It's something we fight. You have to give them permission to make mistakes. It's okay. Just learn from it, fix it, own up to it, and don't make it again. It's okay to make mistakes. And you know what? When you, as a leader, make a mistake, cherish it. And shout it from the rooftops. Because it will show them that you're human too. And you make mistakes. One of the biggest wrongs I did early in my career was hiding every mistake I made, so that I appeared to never make a mistake and be perfect. And that doesn't work, because then people start to think, I can't do this. This guy's a perfectionist. When in reality, that wasn't at all what I was. So please never lose an opportunity to admit a mistake to your people. Determination. You will find brick walls every day in business as a leader. Brick walls. People will bring something to you and go, I can't do anything with this. Can't get past this. It's a brick wall. Your job is to have so much doggone determination that you're going to go look around the wall both ways, climb over it, see if you can bust through it. You're going to figure out a way to get through that wall. If there is one trait that will serve you better than anything else in business as a leader, it's determination. You have to see things differently. You have to have persistence and not give up until you are absolutely certain that you have done everything to see if you can get around that wall. I'm going to tone this one down a little bit for the crowd. If you get in a urinating war with a skunk, you're going to lose every time. I want to tell you what that means. I said that business is all about relationships, right? Okay? So if you get in an argument with somebody about what they said or what you said, that's kind of like getting in a urinating war with a skunk. You're going to lose every time. Because even if you are so adamant that you win that argument, it usually is based on what? A misunderstanding, different perspectives, different expectations. You may win that argument, but you're going to lose that relationship. How do you prevent this? It's by putting things in writing. And you all do it every day right now when you put in POs that have all these disclaimers and you have invoices and contracts and all the things that you do. Why do you do those things in writing? Because you want to make sure that whoever's on the other end of that can't come back to you and say, that's not what I was expecting. I want you to do this. And then you're like, if you didn't have it in writing, how are you going to win that argument? In business, you want to prevent at all costs this. And the way you do that is by making sure that you communicate better than anyone else in writing exactly what the expectations are. As I said before, your employees are the most important of those three groups you're going to work with. So I'm not just talking about what you have your customers sign or your vendors sign. I'm talking about how you set up your company as a structure, because you want to avoid this. Another funny thing, if you've ever been into arguments with people or seen reviews online and somebody refutes a review online, if you read the ones that are the most well written with the most factual information, you tend to believe that one more than the emotionally written one that's very general and vague. Okay? That's a common theme in humanity. And remember that when you think about how am I going to put this in writing. Who's the brains of the outfit? Right? Have you ever had anybody say, who's the brains of this place? Somebody has to be that central neural core, or a team has to be that central neural core. And when you're small, it's probably one person. As you grow, it's probably a team. But why does somebody have to be this central neural core? Because somebody has to understand what's happening in all aspects of your business. Because as you get larger, you start to get siloed. Departments, divisions. This one's over here doing this, and it's affecting that one negatively, but they don't even know it. This one wants to make that change, but it's going to affect this one negatively, and they don't even know it. This one needs help. They need resources. This one has extra. They don't even know it. Communication is the biggest problem in business. And if you or your team are not that central core that has got your fingers on what's happening in all the different areas, silos are going to happen and inefficiency is going to creep in and it's going to kill you. And somebody younger, smarter, and smaller than you is going to eat your lunch. There's always got to be that big picture view, and it's constantly changing, and you have to be constantly fighting those silos. Now, all of this, you're going to say, how in the world could I possibly do all this? How in the world could I possibly do all this? And you're going to hit your ceiling. I've hit my ceiling many times in my career. Those of you probably in business have seen that businesses tend to grow and plateau and grow and plateau, and you probably have in your own career felt growth, plateau, growth, plateau. And some of those plateaus are because you hit your ceiling. I can't do anymore. I can't do this anymore. When you hit your ceiling, I always say you got two choices. You can raise the ceiling or you can lower the floor. Now, raising the ceiling is getting more out of you, being more efficient, using technology. I remember the day when I first had one of those portable digital assistants that you had to plug into your computer to sync in, but it was like a game changer for me, that I could actually go on the road and be able to deal with my calendar and things like that. And today we've got supercomputers on our hips. But there's so many cool apps and so many things that can help you to be more efficient. It's incredible. There are books out there written about them, about how you can up your game and become more efficient. So you can either raise the ceiling, which I personally believe that organization is absolutely the foundation of efficiency. Absolutely. If you want to raise your ceiling, the first step is, how can I be more organized? When I talk about lowering the floor is saying no, stop doing things that aren't a priority, and most importantly, delegate. That's how you lower your floor, so that you have more ceiling to get up to. Now, delegation, which is the most effective way of doing that, you think to yourself, only do what only I can do. Andy Stanley wrote that in one of his books. Only do what only you can do. If somebody else can do it, delegate it. Even if it takes you longer to delegate it. And I see this roadblock all the time. Why are you doing that? Why aren't you having somebody do that for you? It's just easier for me to do it. It would take longer for me to tell somebody how to do it. Yeah, but if you took an hour and showed them how to do it, even though it only takes you 5 minutes, eventually that's 5 more minutes that you don't have to do something. And if you culminate that and you start to grow that, pretty soon all those 5-minute blocks give you a lot higher ceiling. And guess what? They feel better because you trusted them and you trained them and you made them a better person because they now learned how to do something that you used to do. When you think about delegating, think about 10-80-10. You take 10 minutes to show them how to do it. You let them go spend the 80% of it doing it, and I don't care if it takes them 3 hours to do something that you could have done in 3 minutes. They're learning. It's okay. And then have them come back to you and finish up that last 10%. And you make sure that it looks good. Don't ever let the thought process that it'll take me longer to teach them than to just do it myself. Boy, that is not going to get you anywhere. You have to be able to put off everything that you can. And you're constantly going to have to reassess this as you grow. Because the bigger you get, the more things are going to be on you, but the better your people should get as well, and the more you should be able to give to them. You get to choose what you spend your time on. Make sure that you choose wisely. There's another saying, work smarter, not harder. If you want to be the best, you got to do both. You got to work smarter and harder. So I am going to provide you all with a resource list, and on that resource list is all my favorite books. We're going to also try to get a video link out if you want to review any of this. Lisa has my email that she will send out to all of you, so that if you want to touch base with me at some point, ask me a question of follow-up, that would be absolutely fine with me. Are there any questions now that I can answer?
What was the maybe hardest period of time in the last 50 years?
Hardest period in the last 15 years?
50.
50 years. Whew. Wow, that's a great question. I would say that the hardest period for me was when I was young and thought I knew it all, and had the wrong attitude, and I was hard charging, and I was like, man, if you can't keep up with me, that's your problem. And boy, did I have the wrong attitude. And looking back now, I this business could be 10 times the size it is today if I was the person back then that I am today, this business would be 10 times the size it is right now. I lost a lot of really good people because of me. That was the hardest part, probably. Any others? Yes?
When you say, forgive me if this is too personal, but when you say you lost a lot of good people.
Why did I lose a lot of good people?
Yeah.
Because I was a jerk, number one. Because I never went to college. So I graduated high school, took over the business. I was 18 years old, and I started running a business. We only had 6 employees, I think, at that point. My dad had no desire really to run a business. He was an appliance repairman. He was the best there was. Really, he built a business for me, and it's like, when I graduated, he go, here you go. And I'm like, cool, and I thought it was a great thing. And didn't read much in leadership books. High school doesn't teach you how to be a leader. Frankly, I have people working for me that have master's degrees, and college never taught them how to be a leader. And I have a kind of a side nonprofit that works with pastors, and I realized that even in seminary, pastors are never taught how to be leaders. They're taught how to be theologians and pastors, but not how to be leaders. And there's so little resource out there to teach somebody how to be a leader. And when we talk about leader, it's really all about people. And so it wasn't until I read a lot of books and started really reflecting. And one of the sayings that I read when I was early that has stuck with me is, we don't learn from experience. We learn from reflection on experience. And there are so many people that when I read that, I thought, that's me sometimes. And I see that in other people, how they kind of do the same thing over and over, and you think, wouldn't you learn by now? They're not reflecting on that experience and saying, how can I be better? How can I be different? So when I started really reflecting on who I was and why I wasn't the leader I should have been in these books, as I kept reading them and devouring them, and I just spent hours and hours and hundreds of books, it really convicted me that I had no clue what I was doing when it came to leadership. And so I hope that answered your question. Did I get it good enough? Yes.
Being a family company, what would you say is was the most challenging thing for you with that? And 2, do you have any, or what advice would you give to other people who are also in family-run businesses?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. Family business. So when I took over the company, I had 2 sisters working for me, my mom and my dad. So that was 5, all family. And that was a really, really difficult time to, show up to work and you got your 2 sisters, your mom, your dad, and suddenly you're getting into this, bad decisions made from a business standpoint that get in the way of you going over for dinner Sunday. Eventually, my mom got out of the business, and then my dad, even after I bought him out, stayed with me till he retired, and he was in his early 80s. He worked part-time, and my dad was just the greatest guy and the greatest mentor. And we really worked well together because we had common values. And so we saw things the same way, we respected the same things, we understood that it was about hard work and honesty and integrity. And I can tell you that today I have my 2 sons work for me, my wife works with me, I have nephew. Do I have anybody else? I'm trying to remember. Pardon?
I think you did it.
And so, how does that work now? I've got my 2 sons, and this is how it works. Clear, written expectations. Clear, written, 1-page document. The most important page in our company. Because now the discussion is focused on that. And they know clearly in writing exactly what's expected of them. And if it isn't met, the conversation's not that hard. So I would say that today I am far more successful at having family in business than I was in the early days. It is hard, and I would not recommend it unless that family member, you're confident that they share your values and subscribe to the way you want business done. Because if they don't, better to keep it not there. Great questions, you guys. Wow. Any others?
Nope.
Yes.
I was just going to say, what's your 5 or 10 year goal for the business?
5 or 10 year goal. Well, about 5 years ago, my goal was to semi-retire. Actually, about 20 years ago, my goal was to retire when I was 45. That came and went. 50 came and went. And then I said, okay, clearly we adopted our daughter, and I said, okay, I'm going to have to stick with this for a while. That and the fact that my wife told me I can't retire. So I said, okay, my goal is to build a leadership team that I can go away 1 week a month and do something to just kind of decompress. I love to fly fish, so I go and 1 week a month and I go fly fish. So my goal for the next 5 years is to build a leadership team and that can take over for me, that I can do whatever I want in my spare time, and more importantly, the people in the business are set up for success without me. So I may still need to have my hands in the pie a little bit here and there, but I want to be able to hand it over in such a way that I don't have to be there. It'll run without me. And frankly, it will run without me today. I mean, if I got hit by the beer bus leaving here, the business would still run. It'll be different, but it'll run. Thankfully, my life insurance is enough that it'll pay off all the debts. And so they won't have as much debt, and so they'll be able to live a little more happy and free. But if I continue to live, which I hope I do, then my goal is to make sure that they are set up for success so that 5 years from now I can look back and go, it's pretty much on autopilot. They'll be making the tough decisions because no business is ever actually on autopilot. Good question. I think there was one question here somewhere too.
At what age did you start really making these moves? I mean, to write down 50-year business.
Yeah.
I imagine that was at year 3 or 4. It sounds like this happened.
So I had a lot of really difficult times in my life growing up. I went through a divorce when I was in my late 20s. Very difficult time. Married my lovely wife when I was 30. I think we were 30, right? She is a far higher educated person than I am, and has multiple degrees and worked in an HR company, and really started the turning point for my thought process. So I was in my 30s when I really started to reflect, and it was with a lot of her guidance and help and saying, hey dude, wake up in here. You need to be a different person. And that really started the movement for me. So it was in my 30s that I really felt like I started to understand, but it wasn't until I was in my mid-40s that I really felt like that it was like a 15-year journey. And when I was in my mid-40s, I really started saying, okay, this is really going somewhere. And I can see that we're really making great progress, and this is becoming far more than just me. And I'm 57 now, and I can say that I just so wish that I just started at 18 what I started in my 30s, because who knows where I'd have been. But it was all part of God's plan. I can tell you one thing, it's never too late.
How many Bekins locations and how many employees? You talk about starting, family, small team. Where are you now 50 years later?
So we started in the garage on my 8th birthday. My dad built a 1,400 square foot ranch by himself. He was a very handy guy. I was born in that place, a single stall garage. My mother never parked her car in that garage her entire life because my dad used it as his workshop. And so that's where we had all of our parts. We rebuilt stuff. And so we started out of a garage. And when I was 14, my dad asked me if I wanted to open a store. Much later on in life, he told me, the reason I asked you that is because I knew you would never be happy being an appliance repair technician. I didn't see that in myself. My dad was an incredibly content person, phenomenally content. That gene skipped me. And so he said, you want to open a business? And I said, oh, yeah, that'd be great. I didn't have a clue what I was getting into. And so we opened the store in Grand Haven in 1982. And it's still in the same location where we started it. It's been added onto and remodeled about 20 times. It's now the full footprint of the 2 city lots we have there. We can't go any bigger. And then in 2012, I opened the Grand Rapids store. And that was the biggest growth year we've ever had as a company. We doubled our volume and doubled the number of employees in a 12-month period. That was insane, and I never want to go through that again. And then in 2015, because of the growth of that store added, we built our warehouse operations center in Coopersville. which is now about 70,000 square feet. We had to add on to that as well. So we have about 130 employees, and we just hired another one today, and I had 3 interviews yesterday, and so we're constantly growing. And I say this also, this is so true. People ask me, how big do you want to be? And if you read our single most important document, nowhere in it does it say anything about size. Nowhere. It says we want to be the best. And this is my answer when people ask me, how big do you want to get? I don't care. I don't care if I'm just myself or 500 people. I don't care how big we are, as long as we're the best at whatever it is we do. And the only way that we grow is by our people. It's not up to me how big we grow. I can go buy a store, open a store. I can expand when it just takes money. That's not what it takes in this business. Yeah, I mean, it does take that, but that's not the important thing it takes. What it takes is people. And you can only find and grow people so fast. That's the limiting factor in our business. How quickly we can find people that share our values and how quickly we can get them trained. That's what limits our growth. Yes?
On the heels of that, you mentioned it does still take money, right? And when we're talking about expectations, accountability, scorecard metrics, whatever the word is, those oftentimes are tied to dollars and cents or some type of goal out in front. How do you marry those two ideas where it's the right person, but then I'm also going to set this target, that may or may not be tied to money?
So there are some of my leadership team that have financial responsibilities, meaning they're responsible for a P&L statement of a division. And so their pay or bonuses or expectations are tied to the profitability of that division. And then, of course, there's salespeople who you tie that to commission and what they sell. Most of the people in the company, though, their goals aren't tied to financial things. Those expectations, training, and accountability are more set on their performance and how they align with the values of our company. The financial part is really kept to fewer people than what most people might think. I don't want people that are day-to-day out there working with the customers that are really doing a harder job than what I am. I don't want them thinking about how this necessarily impacts the bottom line. I want them to take care of the customer. And so most of them are not going to be directly related to that financial thing. But like I said, we have 5 divisions as a company, and each of those have a manager of those divisions, and they have financial accountability, which rolls up to the overall corporate financial accountability. I hope that answered it well enough. You guys are great questions. Wow, this is a phenomenal group. Any others? Okay, thank you all very much for your attention. You have been great. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.